Hi and welcome to the Shift Stirrers, challenging how we do organisational change management and transformation. Join Sabeto Group's Angela Baker and QX Group's Dan Marks as they talk about the good, bad and downright ugly of the change space, a place of brutal honesty and advice on the how.
So Dan, here we are on the topic of change templates. It's a pretty exciting topic. We thought that we would have a chat today around the mind-bending world of templates. Have you ever met a template you didn't like? What works? Why do we need them? Do they even have a soul? Are they all the same kind of different? Why are they so expensive if you're going to buy one? What do you really need to be able to do? So Dan, I guess I'm going to open with the question, have you ever met a template you really didn't like?
I thought you were going to say something like, I'll show you my template if you show me yours.
Well, Dan, I'm happy to do that. But given this is a podcast, I can't show anybody anything at the moment. Hopefully everyone is actually just listening and not watching.
All right, I'll get us back. It's funny. I remember meeting the first change person that I interacted with in this big organization that we're part of, making a big change. And I just remember them having all these cool visuals and these cool templates and thinking, man, they really know what they're doing and they really got their self sorted. And it took me a bit of a while. And then obviously over time, as I became more used to ways of working and started to do that myself, I started to see this repetition and this constant redoing what was already there. But I remember that day so clearly thinking, wow, this is really awesome and it's really planned out and it's really structured and it's really organized. And they really added a lot of value. Like they were hugely valuable, and they really connected with leaders. They really did. And so it impressed me straight away. But I guess over time, and now that you kind of talk to those, your comments at the start, you start to see through it, don't you? And, after being much more experienced now and doing this lots of times and having worked with lots of different program teams and lots of different leaders, you start to get a little bit more turned off by the whole template world.
So what would you think about, I've been looking at all the roles that are being advertised on LinkedIn over the last couple of months, and I'm seeing increasingly, it could be that I haven't looked for recent years and it's just this year I've focused on it, but the amount of change roles that are advertised, no matter what level they are, and insisting on certification in change management. And some of them are director level roles and they're asking for things like ProSci certification. Now, to me, that shows that you actually don't understand what the ProSci certification is all about versus what a change practitioner actually does, especially someone who is going to be a strategist, who you want to sit across a program or a portfolio of different projects. But what are your thoughts around that, around certifications?
Yeah, I mean, the first comment I was going to make with that was you can tell the people that were writing the ads and submitting the ads actually don't know what they want and don't know much about change. That was the first thing I was going to say.
And I'm so sorry for anyone that is listening and you feel like you identify, but we're more than happy to have a chat with you about that.
There's help around the corner. Look, it's funny. A lot of the roles that we see in some of the work that we do request ProSci certification. Yeah. And look, I've only had ProSci certification for like the last 6 years or so, and haven't used it.
So you've gone and got it, yeah.
I did, and you know why I did it? Because I was interested more than anything. I saw the ask out there, but do I see it as a necessity for a change person, and particularly more senior ones that are less about following a step-by-step process and guide and more about feeling and seeing what the organization needs and applying. Look, it's helpful, and I'm not saying don't do it or don't be part of it or don't use it.
There's nothing wrong with ProSci per se. This is not
and many others,
not a
right?
ganging up on ProSci. It's more, it has a purpose, I feel myself, and it's for a specific target market, and it was originally designed for a very specific purpose. It wasn't necessarily designed for professional change practitioners, is my memory of it. So I was curious as to see, you know, when I asked you, have you seen a template that you think's really great? And you're kind of answering that question with the certification. You've not used it since you've had it. And you've been in heavy change roles, right? Big, small, senior, probably more middle of the road, you know, implementation type projects as well over the years, plus setting up your own business, etc. Like, where does this come in handy and useful to have templates?
Look, I think there's some huge benefits with templates, and we do use them and apply them. But you know, consistency is one, a set structure, standardization. You know, when you talk about, particularly when you look at program change, where you might have multiple projects with multiple changes and multiple change teams, you really do need that structure and that standardization, and it does help lots with that. But it's not to box you in, and I think that's what templates, I see a lot of that. It does that. It really constricts the change person to be able to go and apply what's needed for the change. And yes, they're guides, and yes, they're help with ways of working, but I see a lot of change people that get stuck on it and will apply it to the letter and get constricted by it and not think outside. And the worst thing I see is that they'll then go and talk to leaders and show them these great templates and show them all the mechanisms and working behind it. And you just think, oh, I feel sick. You can't do that. That's not what they need.
I laugh because I'm picturing a few chiefs that I know, especially chief underwriters in financial services. If you go to them with a template, they'll just tell you, oh my goodness, why are you showing me this? You're a beep. And then I guess, you know, when you're picturing these programs, I mean, I know for myself, there's your stock standard technology projects where you've got programs of work. You might have separate projects that are implementing different parts of it or different phases, and the templates can work. And when we're talking templates, we're talking change impact assessments, change plans, training needs analysis, training plans, comms and engagement plans, stakeholder analysis, all of those standard things that come that have their place. Yep. But what if you're on a cultural transformation, or there's a big stream of work that's around leadership development, and the PMO or the CMO or whoever has said, well, we've got these stage gates, and to get to this next stage gate, as a bare minimum, somebody's put in there, you need a change impact assessment. How do you go about that with your template for a leadership development program?
This is a very tricky scenario, but it happens very regularly. I would say it's most of the work that we do, you get cornered into a certain amount of deliverables at certain amount of stages. And the way we overcome it openly is, you know, we'll do the task. And sometimes we'll do the task, but there's much more needed than that, or different work is needed than that. So albeit you might still achieve what the program is designed or required, or what your contract is outlined, and you will do that. But the actual work that we deliver on is much more than that and much wider than that. And it might support the deliverables that you've created, and you might add that to all of that work. But at the end of the day, it shouldn't define your only work activities. And yes, we work to contracts and deliverables, and so we will hit those and do those. But I think it's so much wider than that. And this is where we talk a lot about the value of change and what change is yes, your client might have an expectation 6 months ago or 12 months ago. Yep. But once you start to get into the change, you'll start to see pretty quickly that actually that's not that needed at the moment, or that's going to be required later, or not at all. And we've got to go and shift and do these other things.
So I feel like sometimes, and it's probably worth contemplating if someone's listening and not thought about doing this, is if I really believe that something's not needed and I've got a PMO or a program lead insisting that it is, it's finding what you can replace that with. So sometimes it's just not possible. So especially with those more, in some instances, those HR related things where, you know, the team are developing a leadership development package, the change is contained within that. It's just going to need some comms to drive it out. You know, it's getting, sometimes you have to go as far as getting a dispensation which sounds ridiculous, but getting a dispensation or an exception agreed to, that you're not going to deliver that because it's not going to add any value. It's actually going to weigh you down with work that's going to frustrate everyone because you can't do it. You may not have enough information, and then it just becomes superfluous. So I guess as a way of, also using the influencing skills around, okay, how can I pragmatically go about this? And if you're dealing with an immature environment where they absolutely still want to know that they're getting their pound of effort out of you, you replace that deliverable with something else that's going to be more meaningful, and still do all the change things. But I guess it brings it back to the conversation around, do you feel that change needs to be a little ambidextrous or morph into whatever a program needs, as opposed to being part of a set structure and you get a change manager and they come with this tool set, which is a bit more project management. Like, there is really only one way to run a project, as much as people say otherwise. It doesn't quite marry up with the project management role. But what do you think, Dan?
Well, does it have to? I guess that would be the first question I'd ask is, so why does it have to be driven by that? And why does it have to marry up perfectly? And, does that really work in reality? And I'm interested in your thoughts there, Ange, because I think we're driving at this kind of structure and step by step and, suggesting that's kind of the only way. But I don't know if it is. I think, my only comment was here is that we're talking about projects where there's change people or lots of change people. We know that in lots of organizations, they don't have that. Or they might have a comms person, or they might have someone that can address some of the needs, but not all of the needs.
That's where I think, so, I find the longer I've been involved with change management and trying to run away from it, which is the next podcast around how to sustain a career in change, is it's not that the less you know, but it's sort of like the less boundaries there are around what you actually do. And especially if we've had this conversation in previous podcasts where, it depends on where you grew up in your professional life and the mental framework that you bring with you. But I think what you're saying, and I agree with, the less mature an organisation, the more they need templates. And the less change practitioners that they actually have on the ground, the more they need them. And sometimes, and again, this is where I think the world's going, sometimes actually it's enough for self-help to potentially get some training. I'm not talking about template-driven training, but it's beneficial to get some training in, for instance, an impact assessment. So if there's only 2 or 3 things you ever do when you're about to run a normal BAU project, you always do some sort of an impact assessment, even if it's a finger in the air, quick skim, so that you can articulate what's changing, and then also get the goodness of why are we changing it? What is the benefit, no matter how small or large that change is? And then some sort of a plan and an outcome that you're driving for. So actually articulating the outcome. Now, I remember in the old days when I grew up as a project manager in aviation, we used to do the PMP. So we do the project management plan, and that would have the whole business case. And that's where it would articulate the value, the benefits, the tangible and intangible benefits of a project. For some reason, that's disappeared out with the Word document world, but it was the most valuable document.
Agree.
Now the change manager often seems to have to come in and be able to articulate the value, because we usually have to articulate our value, even though they asked us to come in. But, it would be the impact assessment, some sort of a plan that articulates the change and the outcome, and then an implementation plan as to, okay, what's all the stuff you need to do, and understand who you need to actually engage without overanalyzing it. I can't remember your question. This happens to me all the time.
No, I think you answered it properly. You answered it really nicely, which was, and the question was a little bit around the structure and do you have to follow the structure? And I think you answered it nicely. The other question I wanted to ask, or comment I wanted to make, was around, even with all these templates, do you see organizations apply them? Because
well, that was the other thought I had, and this would resonate with you as well, I would imagine, where we've both been in business, we've been in and out of consulting. you're probably now in a bit of a hybrid variation of a theme, as I am in our own businesses. But you would think when you work for a large global consulting firm that eventually you can just take stuff off the shelf. So, oh, it's ready to go. We're just going to tailor it a little bit and then boom, done. We're ready to go, really efficient. And every single time, it's as if we've never done it before. And we're creating things from scratch. We'll try and take a little bit from here, a little bit from there. But I'm always surprised, and even in client organizations where they've been rolling out big system changes for years and they still haven't got, I sort of say the capability, but they still don't have a clear suite of, okay, you should have a library of stuff now. Even, in fact, I was thinking before we started this podcast, even around, irrespective of all the normal stuff that listeners will be, conscious of using all the time, the standard templates, the lessons learned, like where do the lessons learned, even around, well, we ran this program and these 3 stakeholders, they're going to be your biggest obstacle. This is how we worked around it, or this is what we tried and it was a total fail. So you learned from it. I'm not even sure we talk about it, and we often have a lessons learned, especially if you're doing more agile projects and there's the retros. But actually, do we actually ever apply it and change things as a result of that?
No, I think the answer is not effectively at all. And, in all the projects that we do, there's always a lesson learnt process, and it's captured and usually in a PCR or something like that, a transition. But where does it go? And then the next change team that comes in, or the next project team that comes in, do they have easy access to that to be able to help inform them and start up again? Definitely not. Definitely not. And maybe that's a consultant approach or process, but I think it's actually organisation maturity. There just isn't that maturity there.
But even, not even the poor consultants that end up leaving and moving on to something else, but even if I think of when I've been in, more very closely working with the business, the client side, and seeing multiple different firms come in for different parts of programs, it's not, there might be some lessons learned. There may be some reflections on, I think we kind of stuffed up when we did X, Y, Z. But where does the self-reflection go? So I know this is not quite on topic with templates, but I think it does matter, because depending on who's setting up or overseeing the change function for programs and in transformation offices, does anything actually change? Like, it should be, actually, you're going to have 3 variations of a theme. You're going to have small change, which is change management light, and you're going to do these 3 things, and that's all they need. And we know how to size up the effort and what kind of people we need on it. You got change management medium, which is going to be all the bells and whistles, bar these 5 things, whatever they are. And we've got the templates you can repurpose. And then we've got the more abstract change, which is probably going to be a slightly different approach. And actually, you're only going to use 2 out of the standard suite. And then we're going to need this kind of person to come in who can tailor what they need to do to get that project or program or whatever initiative up and running. And then it comes to the measurement as well around, does anybody, there's a post reflection, but then how do you measure it? And I'd be keen to hear your thoughts, because you're probably more inclined brain cell wise to think that way than I am. I'm like, oh, how does everyone feel? Is everybody, we just need to make sure we've sold the journey and everybody's galvanized around the purpose of all and the value of all of this. But I have had people ask me to come up with a measurement plan based on ADCAR. Well, how will we know that we've got them to awareness? How will we know that we've got them to desire? How will we know we've got them to act on something? So we need clear measures for each way. And I've tried. I tell you, I've tried. But I still haven't found a way.
And I think this is the nous of the change person, really, and this is you applying what you know about the organisation and your experience to say, hey, leader, here is where you should be at this stage. And that's what we do, Ange. Like we wouldn't say, here's the perfect science to this. We would say that based on all of the experiences we've seen, this is the target that we want to hit. And, we're either above it, at it or below it, and then here's what we're doing to address. And that's normally the approach that we would take it in these instances. And I'm a big measures fan, so yes, I do this a lot. We don't normally peg it to ADCAR as an example, but you're right, clients do ask that, and we will sometimes do that. But in the end, I think they quantify the output based on some of those things. And so if you don't have them, that question always comes back of what value am I getting? What are you guys actually doing? And so I like to front load that and say, well, here's where you want to be. Here's the different stages that we're at, or the different project stages, and here's how we're going to get there, and here's how we're going to measure, and we'll keep telling you how we're going along that journey. And that at least gives confidence that, okay, there's a structure, there's an approach, there's a process, and we get your thinking, and we support it and endorse it. So yeah, and it's probably not a great answer, by the way, but that's how we do it, and it's not a perfect science. So we will make a call based on where the organization is, how mature the program is, and all of those facets come together to go, all right, here's where we think is achievable and acceptable in terms of the program of work.
I'll just call QX next time. Somebody asks me. Help. So this is a short and sharp podcast. Dan, what would your top 3 be with change templates, the ones that you really feel keep you sleeping well at night?
Look, I think you hit the nail. Like certainly a planning template. That's key. The impact analysis component is really important. I'm going to give 4 stakeholder. The stakeholder analysis. I really like the stakeholder analysis part. And look, I'm going to bring plan and implementation plan together just for the sake of being able to have more. I love something around measures. We just talked about those. I love having something there. Yes, it's in your change plan, so you can kind of use it in that part, but I like having probably some additions, some nice presentation PowerPoint templates that execs can see and follow, and we show over time how things change. They're the things that really stand out to me as my must-haves.
So can I push it one step further? Because I think we're in agreement there, even though you haven't asked me the question back. I'm sure I gave that answer without being asked. I know. I think I just gave it to you before without even being asked. That's what I'm saying. I'm the rude one. What are your top 3 measures?
Look, something on leadership. So whether that's commitment to the change or something like that, I'm always interested in that. That helps me a lot with sponsorship.
Yep.
I really like user experience. That's another one that is an absolute driver, because that's kind of usually where a lot of the benefits are driven around user experience. And then the third one is around activities of work, and are we hitting them? So, and that's more an internal measure.
So the delivery, are we delivering on time?
Yeah, I think you need to have that. Yeah. Yep. What about yourself?
Look, I just fly by the seat of my pants, to be quite honest. No, I mean, obviously you've got all the readiness checks. I think it's really important to be clear when that runway actually starts. And I always say runway because it does tie itself nicely to an aviation analogy. Are you ready to line up, prepare for that launch? I think there's something around embedding. So I think you touched on it with the second measure. It's around user experience. But I think that's where you can get the tactical, and unfortunately it comes after the project. So is that something that you need to sustain and then hand over to the business if you're not hanging around for much longer after the go live, depending on the kind of program you're on? But that comes down to working with the tech team to find out to what extent are people actually, if it's a tech rollout, and I've just assumed that in these measures around, are people actually optimizing the use of the system the way they're meant to be, and making sure that you can actually get feeds from the system and reports around that? Because otherwise what will happen is 6 to 10 months down the track, they may not have actually used a part of the system until later, and then they go and use it and it all falls apart because it either hasn't been tested or you didn't validate it during testing, and then it's seen as a failure. It's just that they didn't use that part of the system until further down the track. So I think that's the one that's a good, really tangible one to do, and make sure that you're at least handing it over if you're not hanging around. That's for tech projects anyway. As for culture and leadership, that's, you've got all your HR measures and your other diagnostics that can tell you how you're going and if you've got a shift.
I'm really glad you called out readiness too. I'm really glad you called out that critical for our area.
I love doing
the
user acceptance testing a week before go live, and then
gosh.
trying to figure out how you're going to deliver training.
Oh, that's where the sweat begins, isn't it? That's where you start to get really scared. The one thing I wanted to call out at the end, though, is from a template perspective, isn't this area ripe for some tech and AI to really speed up and improve this process? Like far out.
There should be a way, and some of the big product owners should really be at the forefront of this, which is, there's only so many personas that you're going to get out of an SAP or a PeopleSoft. So, or any of the other products that are out there, Workday, whatever it is, they should provide a standard suite of user types that you can then just adapt. And there should be some way of going into the tool and asking a few questions, and it's spitting out to you, here are some of the generic change impact assessments. At least it can fast forward. That work usually takes about 3 months of elapsed time, honestly, and it can fast forward. Then you're in workshops, you can hear what the difference is and go and update it, as opposed to having to start from scratch with a blank Excel. So it's crazy. I'm hoping someone out there is working on it. And if not, look, let's just be the next Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, but it's Dan and Ange. Ange, who's useless with data and numbers and tech. You wouldn't know it to judge by the companies I've worked for. And we make millions of dollars. But anyway, we'll leave our podcast listeners with that crazy talk and tangent.
I think I've shown you my templates. Ange, have you shown yours?
Look, I haven't entirely, but that's a whole other story. But I'm happy to share. Thank you for showing me your templates. And I do feel that there is some soul behind this. So next time you're looking at a template, treat it with respect and care, but really question, are you here? Are you in the right place at the right time? Or do I need something else?
Have a great day, everyone.
See ya.
Thanks for joining us today. Hopefully we've sparked your interest and challenged the way you go about helping large corporate and government organisations land change. Follow us to get the latest Shift Stirrer updates, and of course like and share our podcast so your colleagues can join the conversation. We love to connect with others managing change, so reach out to talk more about changing your organisation, leaders and teams. The information in this podcast does not consider your personal information and circumstances. The information in this podcast is intended solely for educational purposes and is not a replacement for personal and professional advice. The Shift Stirrers by QX and the Sabeto Group does not accept any responsibility for loss or damage that may be caused by actioning information provided on this podcast. Past performance is not an indication of future performance. We may discuss stories to demonstrate the information we are discussing, however results differ between individuals and are reliant on various personal factors, so the results are in no way guaranteed.